It's no longer a game. Hello, I'm Mike Bain from Christian Voice New Zealand. You know, the collapse of society really is coming, and most of us will find ourselves completely and utterly unprepared when it finally happens. You know, survey after survey in New Zealand points to a genuine concern that we're not confident of our future. If we were to look at the political polls conducted over the past decade, especially the question on optimism, like, are you happy where the country is headed? There's more dissatisfied people than there are satisfied. Now, I acknowledge that over the past decade we've had changes in government, and although the recent change has brought about an increase in optimism, but is that superficial, based on some form of hope brought about by an inner fear it might not happen? If you're feeling this way, you're not alone. In his Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24 of the Bible, when speaking of the time of the end, Jesus used a nearby fig tree to make his point and said to his disciples, "Learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door." So what is it exactly that's causing people to lose heart, to lose certainty about their future? As an honest person, one who is not afraid to speak the truth, the answer comes down to what you believe, what it is that occupies that space in your head. There is just so much mistrust these days. Every night when I watch the news, I find myself checking each story as to whether it's true and not just spun the way that it is, just looks true. Faith in all our major institutions is dropping. And here in New Zealand, the Reader's Digest every year takes a poll to find out who the most trusted brand is and or their profession. Last year we trusted Whittaker's chocolate as the most trusted brand, and doctors were the #1 trusted professional. But there's a growing consensus that very challenging times are ahead of us. Yeah, here in 2024 we'll be facing huge issues, not just at home, but from overseas. And while we may have plenty to say about the rights and wrongs of things like societal change, you know, it won't matter one iota, because we here are just a small country at the bottom of the planet. And because of our geographical isolation, we're not living in the same nightmares that people on other continents find themselves in. Now, later this year, the people of the United States, for example, they'll get to vote in what is already being described as the most chaotic election season in the country's entire history. Multiple wars are erupting all over the planet. Economic problems are rapidly growing. Destructive natural disasters are becoming more frequent. And global authorities are warning us to brace ourselves for the next pandemic, and our cities are being absolutely overwhelmed by endless waves of new migrants. So the stage is set for a societal implosion of epic proportions, and many around the globe are feverishly preparing for the coming collapse that they believe is inevitable. In New Zealand, our civil defence message a few years ago was "Get ready, get through." Remember how we were encouraged to have emergency kits to get us through a disaster. The idea, like wearing life jackets on a boat's a good one, but really, who complied? And like the people of Hawke's Bay found out last year, having faith in your government would help keep society stable was, well, it was unfounded. Today, if you actually believe that the government will be there to rescue you when things really start hitting the fan, can I say you're delusional? Many New Zealanders are realising that they'll be forced to rely on themselves as society collapses, but no one, and I mean no one, is spending significant money on emergency preparedness. Given the cost of the living crisis in this country, no one can afford to think beyond dinner time, let alone next week. But spending a couple of $100s on some emergency preparedness items simply is not going to be enough to survive what is eventually coming. I keep coming back to this point. Many, and that number increases, but many of the wealthy are divesting assets around the world, and they're building shelters for themselves. You know, some of them have even built them here in New Zealand. Now, come back to Jesus' words. Learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as the twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that the end is near, right at the door. Hey, look, this is not a doomsday message by any means, but ask yourself, when things get really bad, will you shut your door to those that are requesting help? We've all seen the dystopian movies where people will be so desperate and take what they want for themselves. We no longer have to wait for those times here in New Zealand. We're seeing certain groups of people already helping themselves in places like supermarkets, and there's no consequences. Discussions on collapse often turn to signs and signals. The economy, politics and social tensions have become increasingly unstable for many years now. And much like adding more and more weight to a man standing on a frozen lake, eventually the ice is going to break. But the question is, how do we know when that moment will be? As cultural systems begin to dissolve due to political clashes and economic decline, the real evil tends to slither out of the woodwork. It happens slowly at first, then all at once. A sure sign of the accelerating collapse is the growing prevalence of psychopaths and psychopathic behaviour in the open. As New Zealanders, as a country, we're in the middle stages of such a collapse, with many sociopaths and psychopaths beginning to feel that they might be able to act out their worst impulses without consequences. They're beginning to test the waters to see what they can get away with. Years ago, which was last century, I asked a man about the changes in society that we were seeing back then. If the end of civilization was coming, his answer to me was, well, Mike, if you think it's happening, then it really is. The old man's words really resonated with me because they're so true. I'm sure that you've noticed that the same thing. Evil is literally growing all around us, and the inmates are taking over the asylum. And I'm entirely convinced that 2024 is going to be a historic turning point. So the question is, are you ready for the tremendous chaos that is about to come? If you haven't figured it out yet, then let's start by understanding why these things are happening. Why Jesus told his disciples about the terrible things to come, and why he said, for these must happen. Each one of us, in order to get through, we need to get ready. Yes, we need to ensure we have an emergency kit prepared. That's just common sense. But we also need to ensure that we have the right standing before God. I talked about trust earlier. You can put your trust in a Whittaker's chocolate bar or your doctor if you like, but I'll tell you this, when society goes to hell in a handcart, I'd rather have the trust in what many refer to as that mystical man in the sky. I'm talking about God, the God of the Bible, who already has a record for saving individuals and nations from destruction. How about you? Who are you putting your trust into today? If you want to find out more about God, the Bible, or even what can give you faith in your future, then feel free to reach out to a local Bible-believing teaching church or contact us through this website and we'll be able to help you. Hey, it's not a game. Learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it's near, right at the door. The collapse of society really is coming, and most will find themselves completely and utterly unprepared when it finally happens.